All right, about 1 minute and we'll get going, assembly. Oh, that was much less than a minute. Suddenly became 6 o'clock. Sarah, you were ready to go on your side? Perfect, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I will go ahead and call the regularly scheduled meeting of Tuesday, December 27th, 2022 to order. Please join me for a flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional first people of Sitka. With gratitude, we proceed on Tlingit Ani. Sarah, roll call, please.
Mayor Eisenbeis,
Present.
Mr. Mosier,
Here.
Mr. Yestad,
Here.
Mr. Christensen,
Here.
Mr. Pike,
Here.
Ms. Carlson. Here. And Ms. Duncan is absent this evening.
Thank you. Any correspondence or agenda changes this evening? With no ceremonial matters that would bring us to special reports, we do have a scheduled special report from Chairman Woody Woodmark. Good evening, sir.
Mr. Mayor and Assembly members, I have a summary of our action items on December 7th and December 14th. The council approved the resolution between STA and Alaska DOT, grant an amount up to $205,000. Also, the council authorized the submission of a grant application to USDA in shellfish testing an amount of $100,000. The tribal council finished up its committee assignments. Each council signed up for committees within the tribe, appointed, made some appointments to the Beha Board of Commissioners. Council authorized staff to submit a U.S. Fish and Wildlife grant an amount up to $668,000 for a fisheries monitoring program. The council donated a crest from the Baranof Bruins Youth Wrestling Club, approved a donation to the Sitka High Wrestling Team, approved a letter to the Alaska DOT regarding the Seawalk Phase 2 comments, approved a letter to the Board of Game regarding Southeast Alaska game proposals. And like the council approved enrollment resolutions, and last but not least, approved the 2023 legislative priorities. And hopefully I can get that to the assembly, copies of our legislative priorities for this year. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And yeah, would look forward to seeing the legislative priorities, and hopefully they coincide and we can both bring them back to DC on our respective trips as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And also wanted to happy holidays to everybody and happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you. Is there anyone else here this evening for government to government reports? Municipal boards, commissions, committees? Municipal departments? School district? And students and guests? That'll bring us this evening to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item off of tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual.
Good evening, Sitka Assembly. I hope everyone here had a most
If you could state your name
joyous-
for the record, please.
Oh, my name is not Santa Claus, but Richard Ween. I hope everyone here had a joyous and wonderful Christmas and filled with family and friends and good cheer. I really basically never drank very much. So my good cheer is a glass of Blue Lake water. It would be nice if we would consider how we could carbonate it. That would be fun. Which brings up the notion is we need a report on water sales from Blue Lake, which occurred a couple of years ago. We've had not a single update. What I want to say is that I had heard that Ryan Silva has passed, and I wish that he rest in peace. I was able to work on some cases with him during his tenure on the Sitka Police Department, and I was on the assembly when all the issues that were brought up through that. So RIP Ryan Silva. One of the important things that I think needs to be brought up tonight, and I use a quote from the KCAW report, and that is, Assembly will revisit new rules. And my notion is that one of the hardest things as a surgeon is to do re-op or redo surgery. You got to speak to families, you have to explain it. You're not dealing with virgin tissue, scarring, et cetera. These are hard things. So the question is, you have to deal with how you prevent these kind of things, and sometimes you're not able to. One of the ways that the Assembly can stop revisiting ordinances, for example, is to do a pre-ordinance. To make the ordinance, you don't have to have a reading, you just send it out to the public and let them review it. I do believe that the habit of voting for these ordinances, knowing full well they have major deficiencies, but saying we'll fix it as we go along, is something that I think really shouldn't be. I think that this last stuff with the dealing with Harrigan Centennial Hall and how vendors are dealt with is a real example. Examples of this is, I don't think you design a building with known flaws and then build it and say, let's do it again. And I don't think you'd have kids in a shop build a defective item and say, well, that's okay, let's move on. The lessons learned here is how to produce a quality product. And the quality product here is through engagement, speaking, et cetera. It's not passing things that are known to be defective. So please consider pre-ordinance. Thank you.
Is there anyone else this evening for persons to be heard? Seeing none, that'll bring us to a consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of item A, the minutes from last meeting. December 13th meeting.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the December 13th assembly meeting minutes. Is there any public comment?
Good evening. My name is Richard Ween. This has to do with the appointment of, this is for the minutes. Yes?
Correct, sir.
I apologize. The minutes are okay.
Thank
I was
you.
already thinking about Andrew Colestini. Sorry.
Is there any public comment on the December 13th assembly meeting minutes? Sarah, on the consent agenda?
Okay, on the motion to approve the minutes from the December 13th meeting, Mayor Eisenbeiss,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen.
Yes.
Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson. Yes. And Mr. Pike.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0 on item A.
Brings us to board, commission, and committee appointments. Item B, please.
I move to appoint Andrew Calestini to a 3-year term on the Ports and Harbor Commission.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint Andrew Calestini. Is there any public comment?
Good evening again, Richard Ween. Anyone who joins a board or commission or seeks reappointment needs to be super acknowledged. Andrew Calistini seems, if you read in the packet, his credentials and so forth, he seems like a real solid player and a good, who will be a good participant in ports and harbors, very knowledgeable. So clearly, I know you're going to pass him, but he deserves a major shout out. So, and also to Donna, thank you.
Any other comments on the appointment? Assembly deliberation? Sarah?
On the motion to appoint Mr. Calistini, Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeiss,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
and Mr. Mosher.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0 on item B.
Item C, please.
I move to reappoint Christopher Spivey to a 3-year term on the Planning Commission, Joseph D. Rienzo to a 3-year term on the Tree and Landscape Committee, Scott Wagner to a 3-year term on the Local Emergency Planning Commission, and Jeff Budd to a 3-year term on the Library Commission.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to reappoint 4 individuals to their boards, committee, or commission. Is there any public comment?
Good evening again. This is Richard Ween. Reappointments are a special place and have a special place in my heart. I happen to know of all the individuals who are being reappointed. Chris Spivey does a lot of heavy lifting as chairman of the Planning Commission, as long as with other members, and he needs to be absolutely lauded for his reappointment, or perhaps he may need to seek counseling on why he is taking on these enormous burdens. But thank you very much, Mr. Spivey. Diorenzo is on Tree and Landscape, a knowledgeable guy, great guy. Scott Wagner, solid, and Sarah. And thank you for stepping up. And the perennial ever Jeff Budd. And I gather we won't be seeing him driving his checker cab, which is a great sadness, but we'll know where to find him at the library. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on the reappointments? Assembly deliberation? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve the reappointments, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
and Mayor Eisenbeiss.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0 on item C.
There is no unfinished business, so that would bring us to new business first reading, item D.
I move to approve ordinance 2022-31 on first reading, amending Title 6 Business Licenses and Regulations of the Sitka General Code by updating Chapter 6.19, Regulation of Commercial Operators Selling Organized Excursions or Renting Equipment for Organized Excursions, and Loading and Unloading Commercial Vehicles regarding the electric vehicle incentive. Second.
Thank you for the motion. The second, would either of the co-sponsors like to briefly introduce their item of business? Sure.
And if I'm going to ask the indulgence to, in a sense, introduce all the next 4 items.
While I
real quick.
understand, we're not dealing with those items and
All right,
we have
I
to
was just saying-
speak germanely.
So this, like the other 4, came out of comments that were made at the last meeting. And I think, like I say, the intent was not to hold up the entire thing for some other changes. So this is, there was a comment made that we should make the electric vehicle incentive 100%. And I was trying to let people have a vote on that. And I know that for me, at least, part of the main reason I did this is a lot of the complaints we get about the vehicles are about noise and smell. And this may help alleviate some of that to reduce I won't try not to get any more into advocating, but this is an attempt to address that.
Great, thank you. Is there any public comment on ordinance 22-31?
Good evening again. This is Richard Wing. This ordinance, or excuse me, this amendment to the ordinance that we've been speaking about for weeks has to do to incentivize electric vehicles. The incentivization would be a discount of 50 to 100%. But the incentive provides incentive to switch to electric, increase power sales because of all the electric folks being charged, and to reduce negative effects such as pollution and noise, et cetera. Now let's examine this. Part one is, let's get real. If you're talking about buses, we know that the cost is so great that dropping a couple of $100s is not a discount. And in essence, pollution is the cost of business. We know how that works. Go ahead, sue me, I'll pay the fine. We go on. The other thing is, what would the cost of infrastructure be to charge all of these buses and so forth? And you know it's not just noise and pollution, because an Explorer vehicle with 7 seats is not making noise, is really not polluting or anything like that. It's really the buses that you're talking about. And if you're going to give them discounts, you should give them discounts based upon emissions. You can get handheld emitters that you can stick in tailpipes and so forth, and you can know what they're polluting. And the bottom line is, I don't know what this is about. I honestly do not know what this is about. No one's going to spend $1.5 million on a bus and, feel that that small amount in permit fees will offset it. And people who have already bought fleets are not going, who have spent, $100,000 on a fleet, they are not going to cash them in for electrical vehicles. So the key is noise and pollution. Let's get to that. Go out there on my iPhone. I can get a decibel meter and I can monitor them and give you a report. And emissions are the other aspect. So go to where the problem is instead
All right, thank you, Assembly. We are back, or 2 seconds away from being back anyway. That would bring us this evening to item F.
I move to approve ordinance 2022-33 on first reading, amending Title 6 Business Licenses and Regulations of the Sitka General Code by updating Chapter 6.19 Regulation of Commercial Operators selling organized excursions or renting equipment for organized excursions and loading, unloading commercial vehicles regarding the term of the permit or term of permit.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Would the co-sponsors like to briefly introduce this item as well?
Sure.
Tor?
So this was asked for last time, and there was some expressed some interest in it among the other assembly members, but also from the public. A lot of people said that they would like longer term permits. So we brought it forward, see what happens. And I'm sure we'll talk all the details.
Christie, do you have anything? to add?
Yeah, I guess not only is this just opening up a 3-year permit, but it's basically to kind of kick this whole ordinance off by having so many permits that for this first bidding round that are going to be available at 1 year, so many at 2 years, so many at 3 years. And
is that they have the right to continue that business as long as they feel it is profitable. And one of the things is that you need to consider the plan, because when you have a 3-year, that's a different cost and idea than a 1 year. And so what has to happen is that you have to construct a method where no one is boxed out of Sitka. We saw the numbers when the original ordinance was coming out, that you had the number of businesses that were buying squares. And the key here is to try to have a little excess. And the prior speakers in the past have spoken about 20 squares that used to be, or maybe making even 15. I think you should always have 1 square left over. And that's the way staggering is going to work. Otherwise, you're boxing out people's opportunity, because those will be held for 3 years. So if you have 10 squares and you have a third are for 3 years, you really only have 6 squares. But then some are 2 years, so you really only have 3 squares for newbies if they don't want to put the money down. So your thinking needs to be, staggering's a good idea, but you also increase the number. Otherwise, you are pushing people down the road to look for alternative ways to start their business, and I don't think that that is the intent of this. You also have to, as far as permits go, you have to address taxis and so forth, which really hasn't been. There are people who call you up. You're not a tour operator. You're just going from A to B. I don't think they should have permits, because they already pay a permit for being a commercial driver in this city. And again, you need to think these things out. And it just seems like it's it's squirrel day, squirrel. And you just jump at this and you don't look at where things go in the process. And meaning what will happen when you do this or do that. And you're not forward looking as to the implications. So, staggered, good idea. But the question is, what's not a good idea is the number of squares that are available. And you need to not quash entrepreneurial spirit here in Sitka if somebody wants to come out and
Thank you, sir.
buy
Thank you,
one.
sir. Any other comments on ordinance 22-33?
Bruce Conine, Sitka Wildlife Tours. On this one, there was a lot of confusion. This was a real hard one to read. The first portion, number B, or letter B, is $2,500 per year, and that's just to pick up and deliver. So that would include anybody, right, coming into the Centennial Hall? Is everybody in agreement with that? Okay. And then the 3 and the 1, 2, and 3 year makes sense for getting people in, so I appreciate those changes. And then shortly after that, on in number 6 on the next page here for me, but it said sealed bid procedures. So we went from sealed bids to open bids, but it's still written as sealed bids up here in the wording, unless you guys have changed it since I printed it online. Is it sealed
Okay,
or
if we
not?
answer that.
Because right,
There's no opportunity for back and forth at public comment. You'll have an
Oh,
opportunity
okay,
to
well,
speak during.
right now I've got a
your-
circle
your
that says sealed
comments,
bid
Tom.
procedures. And then it also says that it says there's no fee for some of them, but any accumulated amounts of money or accumulated fee. It's really strange. It says there's no fees, and then it says any money generated or needed in this process, you will not get it refunded, period. So it reads to me like I got to do a minimum bid of $7,500 for square. And if I don't get my bid, if I don't win at all, I just paid you $7,500 to play this awful game. That's the way this is written. Because it says right here, $2,500 must be deposited with a sealed bid and will only be returned if the bid is unsuccessful. That's crossed out. So there's nothing in here that says I will get my fee back. So this looks like a real horrible gambling game where I got to pay $7,500 up front just to play, and then I don't get a chance to get it back. And I may be just reading this wrong, but I cannot figure it out any better than that. And so I'm guessing that the total fee for us operators that have a square and pick people up are going to be starting at $7,500 before bidding, which, it seems like a huge step to make for anybody new in the business. If you knew the amount of money that we put up every year just to get started, you add that onto there. It's definitely going to equate to lower wages for employees. There just doesn't seem to be any other way by the time you look at all the fees we pay out to everybody. I just thought I'd bring that up. I don't know if you could clarify that for me. It says fees. There is no fee for applying for the permit. However, the applicant shall pay for all costs and expenses required for the related to this application. Well, what fees and expenses are required? Could you please make that clear? And if the permit is granted, we got to pay for the fee and then or pay for the thing. And then it says at the end, you will not get your money back if you didn't win. So.
Hi, my name's Harry License. I work with Travel Tours. So as I was reading through this, I had a couple of questions. Bruce kind of went through them pretty good. But I think we're jumping to this 3-year thing a little too fast. We still don't even know how this is going to work for the first year. I think should be something that should be moved on and waited till, because we bid out for 3 years and then we turn around and decide that this isn't what's going to happen and doesn't work out or anything else like that. Then you guys are going to want to either change something, or we're going to get something back, or we're going to pay more. These are little things that draw questions. You guys brought it up earlier, that this is a test, try it out, see how the season goes. So I just feel like this is something that's jumped a little ahead. I feel like if we're going to test out what we're doing, we shouldn't be talking about bidding out more than 1 year to find out if it's what you guys want to do or not. And it just seemed a little premature to me. I could be wrong, but I just feel like we're working one step and then you're trying to throw 3 steps in at the same time. We haven't made it to first step yet. Thank you.
Michelle Barker from Sitka Bike and Hike. I love the term permit. Huge vote, less paperwork I have to do, super awesome. But it's kind of unclear the way it reads. Are you gonna have to pay for all 3 years up front? Because that's kind of a big, okay, you wouldn't, okay. That was my question. Thank you.
Neil McDermott with Alaska, or excuse me, or Wells Song Expeditions. As far as the number of years goes, I agree it should be a staggered. I think it should be absolutely have additional spaces to allow for that staggering. The number of spaces that are out there, there was a discussion regarding how it was crowded on that side of the building, and therefore it would impact the customer's experience, the guest experience while they're here, and also a safety issue. Well, I don't see necessarily a safety issue because it was talked about as far as buses and vans being in that area. They're not really up on the sidewalk, at least hopefully never. The sidewalk over here, once the stanchions and the crowd control, I don't know what they call it, the tape that they put up for crowd control over there to kind of weave people through to the outgoing buses worked really well last year once it was recognized with those long lines that went around and down to the bridge from here. And at the time that those spaces are really used is not the time when the people are really returning back to the cruise ships anyhow. So it's going to be really significantly less used at that period of time. So expanding more to allow for this bid process, or excuse me, the number of bids and the length of bids would certainly be a big help for having access for more people. Also, last meeting, it was brought up that there was 14 vendors, and you're automatically eliminating 4 vendors if you only put 10 spaces out there. So, and there are many new, you heard many new vendors coming on board last year, or excuse me, last meeting, and you would preclude them as well as possibly 4 of the members that were there last year. So thank you very much.
My name is Andy Nye with Sitka Zodiac Adventures. I'd like to thank those that have put this forward. I like the idea of 1, 2, and 3 years. I do have some concerns, however, of the clarity of it. How many spots for 1 year, how many spots for 2 years, how many spots for 3 years, stuff like that, that when I read this, I don't see that in here. And so that concerns me, like, as I'm trying to plan for this next year. Is that something that should be in here? Is that something we need to know? Is that something we're going to learn from Tony? When are we going to learn stuff like that? And so that kind of brings me to the way this has all gone, is that we're now continuing to work through all this stuff. I really wish we could have all gotten together, and it's kind of a moot point at this point, but I hope going forward in the future, if we work together on stuff, that we can all sit down and work together on stuff. I would have loved to have some conversations on some of this stuff and help each other out, so we're not doing it like this. You know what I mean? And then as far as like the 7,500, the 5,000, and the 2,500 and stuff like that. Just kind of a little bit more clarity of, let's say you get a 3-year bid and then something happens, that you're not able to survive the 3 years, heaven forbid that doesn't happen. Does it just go back and goes to somebody else? Is there a penalty? Just stuff like that you think of as a business owner. I think Mayor Eisenbeiss, you maybe think of that. Something happens, you got a 3-year lease. What's going to happen if something happens, you're not able to hold that 3-year lease? Just stuff that helps what's going to go on with your business. But I would ask that everybody allow us this stability of the 1, 2, and 3-year lease, or whatever you want to call it. But yes, I would really like that opportunity to be able to put in for something for 3 years, but just a little bit more clarity so we know, how many spots are there going to be and how we go about that. After the last meeting, and these were pushed through, and Mr. Leach saying that it was going to go through quick. I came down twice trying to find out, all right, when are we going to start bidding? When are we start going? And still hadn't heard anything. And then this came out. It's just, we're trying to plan for this next year and hoping to get this taken care of so we can. It's a big, huge question mark in our future that we're trying to get taken care of. Thank you.
Any other public comment on 22-33 regarding the length of permit term? We'll bring it back to the assembly for deliberation. Tor?
Yeah, I'm gonna start out by clarifying some stuff. If you look in there, so the number of squares is not listed specifically because it's going to change from year to year, probably. So it's up to the administrator to split them up roughly 1/3 until they're all at 3 years. You only pay 1/3 every year. It says on there that it before March 1st. If you don't want the permit that year, you don't pay it and you give up your slide, it goes back up. So so it's pretty straightforward. Number of squares is not the issue tonight. I mean, no matter how many squares there are, we're going to try and split them up by 1/3 and make them eventually all 3-year terms so that every year there'll be at least a few coming up. And I suppose if somebody decides to release theirs, then 1 year there might be a 2-year term to finish that one out. But essentially, this was something that was asked for last time. And so that's why it was brought forward. The numbers got changed to 3-year terms, but again, you would just pay for that year. According to this, it's in the on page 3 where they talk about that. So I realize that Brian tries to make them legal and clear, and they're not always possible to do both simultaneously. So and honestly, like I said, we've had a number of meetings about this, and some of them were pretty quiet. So we're trying to react, at least this was the point in bringing this forward, to allow the longer term to give some stability, and we'll see what happens up here.
Yes, Brian. Your microphone's not on. Thank you.
It might be helpful if I provide some explanation for clarity purposes at this point in time. First, let's start with the understanding that in this chapter that the designation and assignment of spaces are left to the HCH manager as approved by the city administrator each year. We'll start with that understanding. And the purpose, again, I'm not a proponent or an opponent of this court, but I was asked to draft it. And it was to increase the term from 1 year to 3 year, and then provide a staggered amount of years for the initial offering and the initial offering only. So if you look in section 6.19.030B1, you'll see the first part of it where the underlying words, it says 3 consecutive calendar years with the amount. So we know that that is what the term is going to be. But the language in the second half of B1 talks specifically to the staggering of this. 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. And it's $2,500 per year for the vendor permits out front and $5,000 per year for the outfitter permits in the back. But each year, once those 1 year and 2 years expire, then the reoffering of those permits is always 3 years. And that's what the stagger effect accomplishes, what Chris was talking about, that the permits then become, only a portion of them become reoffered each year. So we can have people enter the industry each year, not 3 years down the road. So B1 is the one that does that. Then you turn over to the later section of C6 and C7. That's the language for the ultimate offerings for each 3-year term. And it does talk about the $7,500 for the 3-year vendor permit and the $15,000 for the 3-year outfitter permit. Remember, the vendor permit is in the front, the outfitter permits are in the back. And there is a provision in there that says that only 1/3 of what is bid is due by each March 1st. And if you don't pay that 1/3, whether it's 1/3 of the minimum bid or some other amount that's prorated, then what happens if you don't want that, let's say the 2nd or the 3rd year of your permit, and you don't make that payment by March 1st, then the city says, oh, we're going to rebid it, and you don't have to terminate it. Now, if the season starts, you could forfeit that year's permit. If you pay it before March 1st, and then let's say May 1st, you decide, I don't want to do this anymore. Well, according to this code, you can't get your money back. You have to make that decision by March 1st of each year to back out of a 3-year permit, or if you're 2 years into the permit. So I think all those issues that you had are covered in this. And I think they're legal and clear, Okay, that's good. Okay. Now, the sealed bid portion this is the 3rd of 4 ordinances. And we separated, the sponsors decided to separate that out. So the next ordinance that we will talk about is whether to change this, where it currently sits as a sealed bid. So the 4th ordinance that'll be considered today would change that portion to an open outcry auction bid, and would change that language there, because our sponsors wanted that to be considered separately from the issue of the length of the term. And so if this one passes and the next one passes, we would have an increased term, we would have a stagger offering, and if the next ordinance passes, then we would go from a sealed bid to an outcry bid.
Hey, Brian, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
So on the bid part, I think what I was going to ask you anyways, the striking of the line 111, which is 2,500 must be deposited with a sealed bid and will only be returned if the bid is unsuccessful. That is crossed out. And I think people have spoken, and there's similar on line 128, 129. Striking that out could possibly mean you could bid, not get it, and not get your money back.
Well, I don't think so. The reason my intent behind striking that out is that we didn't need a deposit anymore. We now have the provision, you have to pay 1/3 of it by March 1st, not put a deposit on it by the time the application is. So that's the new way of administering.
Mr. Mosier, if you also look at line 106, it does reference a successful bidder.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Brian, did you have anything else or did anyone
That was
else?
it. I was just hoping to provide some common sense discussion and hopefully provide some clarity. These things aren't perfect, but
We appreciate your attempt at clarifying for the questions in the room. Did anyone else have questions for Brian at this point? We can always come back to him later, but thank you. Tor, it was your floor.
Thank you. I haven't got a whole lot more. I think this makes sense. It may provide stability. I do want to take this opportunity to thank Brian because we threw a bunch of stuff at him and he came at it through it pretty quickly because of the holidays and because of the AML. So Brian, thank you for putting all this work in. I think most of the things I was saying, just clarifying it. And again, the main reason for bringing this forward is it was asked for, and I think it makes sense, but I don't know what the rest of you feel.
Chris?
Yeah, I do want to thank Brian for getting this all together and then for clarifying it here this evening, because I think there was still confusion. And I apologize for creating a complicated ordinance. What my whole intent on this one was creating stability for the businesses, because I know in my business, I appreciate stability, even though that is not in the fishing industry. That's a odd word. Yeah, exactly. The part that really spoke to me was when I was hearing some of the businesses saying, with a 1-year term, it was hard for them to apply for loans. And I do know that loans can be extremely important for our businesses. So to me, if a 3-year term was going to help them being able to go out and get some financing and help them get some loans, then that was something that I really wanted to try to help them be able to achieve. So that was my whole goal with this. And then obviously I made it very complicated with my staggered initial bidding, but hopefully that's a little bit more clear now of what my intent was. So yeah, thank you for all the help, Brian, and curious to see what everyone thinks of it.
John?
I just want to bring up one quick concern I have just from a management perspective and the staggering of the bids. I know a lot of, actually all of the flexibility is left up to the administrator and staff on how we execute the number of spaces that are 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year throughout the bid process. And I know this is only for the initial ramp up stage, and then eventually they will all go to 3 years. But at some point, I am concerned that people may vacate their permit early, which would kind of put that schedule off a little bit. Also, it's very true that there are some spaces out there that are better than others, and I think this puts a lot of heat on us to say, okay, which spaces are bid first, and then which term gets bid first. Do I do 3 1 years first, because that would give the 1 year folks the first choice on spots, or do I do the 2 years, or do I do the 3 years, or do I reverse that? And then if a 3 year permit is in place and then a 1 year permit is expired and that 1 year has a better spot, does the person from the 3 year then come to me and ask to move to the 1 year space? I think we'll have to adjust that permit to kind of address some of those things. We may have to put something in there about not being able to sublease the space to anyone else. We may say that if you get a 3 year term, you're locked into that space for the entire term of the permit, just so we can eliminate the trading spaces that could potentially happen. But it's proven to be a bit of a challenge to determine how to fairly differentiate between the 1s, 2s, and 3s when we go to the bid period.
Jim?
John spoke some of my concerns, and I have a couple reservations about this process. One was, what if we decide this process doesn't work, right? So we go through this whole thing, I would be far more interested in starting this next year, for example. So when we all have a chance to see how this process plays out. I'm not saying I won't vote for this, but that is a reservation I have. And then that second one was pretty much what John just said, which is providing clarity to people about what they're actually bidding on. So that, and especially in this first year, when, not all of the bids are equal. And so how do we choose? So is it going to be something like the people that bid the most get the 3 years and the people that bid the least get the 1 years? I mean, how are we choosing to go about doing that? So I'm not sure there's enough, for me, there seems to be a lack of clarity about how we're going to back up the process so that it's fair and that people understand what they're working with. So, and I agree, I mean, there's a balance between flexibility to the administrator and not putting them out on a limb while someone's sawing it off. So.
Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Same. I was about to ask John before he said something. And I guess I'll just ask, John, do you have any other issues? I was going to ask you, do you have any issues from an administrative standpoint with this ordinance? I know it's not, I'm not asking you about whether you think it's a good idea, but as far as implementing it, do you see any difficult? And I think you've already stated that. So I love the idea as far as providing stability. It's a really good idea. I like eventually to have 3-year terms staggered so that every year there's some spots open. But I do think that, as Tim said, there could be, and John alluded to, there could be some confusion as far as, which spot is which and which spot is offered for which one. And so I will probably vote yes on this just to get the second reading. But I would really prefer to keep the main ordinance as is regarding this for the first year to see how functional it is from a logistical standpoint, and then revisit and go from there. But like I said, I'll probably pass it just to get it to second reading and I can think about it a little more.
So for me on this one, a couple concerns, a couple thoughts. I do appreciate the ease. If a business had less paperwork to do for the 3-year term. Chris, you had mentioned that you were sorry for the staggering. I think that initial staggering term, while confusing at first, is good. I think that's the way that had to be. So I wouldn't apologize for that. I actually appreciate that in this ordinance. I do have a concern that this eliminates an ability for a business to get their foot in the door. If I heard correctly, I heard a vendor earlier state that they started here and then they no longer need this space like they once did. And that's my ultimate goal for people, is to grow to a level of success where you've outgrown your 4x4 square and you don't need that anymore. And it doesn't become part of your business model. I want new businesses to come in. I don't necessarily want a turnover because I know that there are people who value this space, especially when it comes into the commercial outfitter space. But I want the opportunity for people to get their foot in the door in the visitor industry without being boxed out by long terms. I also do have a concern about how we would apply inflationary effects over a 3-year term, or more importantly, and probably more correctly, an increase in perceived value. If we continue to grow in numbers, which is a completely different debatable topic, but if the space down here becomes more valuable over the 3-year term, then there isn't a mechanism to necessarily apply that in a per year basis. So I do somewhat have a concern about that, but stability is also nice. John, a little bit on the spot, but currently, and for the last, let's say 20 years, it was a 1-year term out here, correct?
That's correct, 1 year.
So in this instance, it has been 20 years, give or take, of a 1-year term. And there's businesses in this room that have said they've been operating here for 20 years and that it has worked. So in this instance, I think I'm going to stay with status quo. which has worked for quite some time, and that is a 1-year term. So I would not be supporting this ordinance tonight. JJ?
I think it's fantastic that something that was discussed in the last meeting, you heard comments and they're applying them today. I think that is a great use of persons to be heard and open comments. And it's lovely to see, all of the city get together, John and Brian, to make this come. Listening to your comments and working on it now, I see how there was some confusion in potentially thinking that these 1, 2, and 3-year terms would continue through. That does sound nice, and I could see people coming here to get started with that sign out front. However, how it's written, it's just going to all become 3 eventually. And I think that is what was requested directly last time, and I'll be voting for this because this is the process working. What was asked for is now here in front of you.
Tor?
Just a thing I talk about is the other possible circumstances that John was talking about. I think it's not a good idea to try and work into an ordinance every possible contingency. And that's a little bit facetiously, that's why John makes the big bucks. We have to, I think the flexibility to deal with things as it happens is good. And that, I'm sure that way, the staff will come up with what they figure is a fair process. And if, okay, that doesn't work, they can change it. We don't have to go through this every single time, which is why and I know that when we were writing this, Brian suggested that, and I agree that it's, that some of those things are the kind of things that the people down here are much better equipped to do and to actually fix if there really is an issue. And I just to wipe it, I say the situation is obviously very different now than it has been in the past. There hasn't been a need we didn't have more people than we had space, and now we do. So, but I think this is as fair as we can be as far as the terms.
I guess a comment on one thing that was just mentioned, Tor. I don't disagree that we have hired John to make decisions using our guidance. However, I do fear that giving that level of openness in this allows and opens up our staff for a very passionate response from some of the bidders, when that should be directed at this assembly for having set the rules and regulations, not at the staff for implementing the rules and regulations that we have put forward. And I just don't want to put that burden on Tony's back in fear of a process that he deems as fair as possible, but others do not. And then he has to bear the grunt of that burden. Further comments on 22-33? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2022-33 on first reading regarding the term of permit. Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mr. Pike?
Yes.
Mr. Yestad?
Yes.
And Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes 6-0 on first reading. And second reading will
Excuse
be
me,
done
Sarah. I believe that there's an opportunity to go back and change your vote before we go on to the next.
Just
I
before
mistake.
I call it. Or before I
Understood.
read the vote. when I read
Understood.
it, sorry.
That'll bring us to item G this evening.
I move to approve ordinance 2022-34 on first reading, amending Title VI, Business Licenses and Regulations of the Sitka General Code by updating Chapter 6.19, Regulation of Commercial Operators Selling Organized Excursions or Renting Equipment for Organized Excursions and Loading, Unloading Commercial Vehicles by changing from sealed bid to an open outcry auction.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Would either of the co-sponsors like to briefly introduce their ordinance?
Just that this was asked for. And, you know, I honestly, of all of the ones we've talked about tonight, this is the one that I am frankly ambivalent about. I don't think it's going to make a lot of difference to us as a city, but it's what people ask for. So I'm curious to what people say. You know, I could see scenarios where I don't vote for my own ordinance, but at this juncture, I can say without hearing anything, I don't see a problem with it. And I do see some advantages. So I don't know if Chris wants to add anything.
No, you pretty much got it there. As you know, this was asked for, and yeah, I thought we should hear it out and debate and make a decision from there.
Great. That'll bring us to public comment on ordinance 22-34. Again, for clarification, this is changing the sealed bid procedure to an open outcry auction. Is there any public comment?
Good evening, Richard Ween. At the last time this was discussed, I got the sense that a lot of people really didn't understand what an outcry auction is. Outcry auction, I think, is a good idea for this. Sealed bids actually favor deep pockets. You got a lot of money, you throw it in the bid, you know, no one else is going to beat it. And an outcry at least allows the little guy to bid and see where the bidding is going, which I think is important. It could also inhibit bidding as well. It wouldn't be the first time there is collusion in how outcries are done. But then again, sealed bids can also have an element of collusion. Now, what's interesting here is that when you have staggareds, somebody may decide to bid for the 3-year slot, but because there's no penalty for if you decide after a year it's no good, you can just leave it. So you may find something very interesting happening here. Outcry is good. I think it represents transparency, which is very important, but there is always the you know, outcomes which were not anticipated. And I think this is a fascinating process. And I think I see a squirrel.
Michelle, you got to grab the microphone button on the very bottom. Perfect. Thank you.
Michelle Barker from Sitka Bike and Hike. I know that you guys put so much work into this, and I'm so grateful that you guys are paying attention to our industry and trying to make it run smoothly for everybody. This part of it, the bid process, one has me terrified. I've been in operation for 20 years and I could not be allowed to operate anymore. And two, I now am going to be in a position where I've been working with people for 20 years and I have to be in the same room and outbid them out loud. And that breaks my heart. Like, I've been working in this industry for 20 years and lifelong friends that I've known my whole life. And now we're going to go head to head in an outcry bid so we can all have space. And that is really sad. So I hope that this could be reconsidered. When the state redid the fishing industry, they went on longevity When they redid the float house permits, they considered longevity and who would get those. Same thing with IFQs. I mean, it's kind of a state guideline that those people that have been operating do have some security in that. So it's not that I don't want newcomers. I do. I want this industry to grow. But we're in contract with cruise lines, and those of us that have been down here for a long time, that's a scary process for us. Plus going up against people that we've been working with and our colleagues is such a bummer. But I do know you guys put a lot of time into this, and I really am grateful for it. And I want to say thank you to everybody.
This is Bruce Conine with Sitka Wildlife Tours. I agree wholeheartedly with what Michelle said, but I saw this process was going to be done no matter what. And so this was the best version of bidding if it's going to be forced on us. None of us wanted to bid against people we work with every day and we've been getting along with every day and we help. And so that was actually a horrifying thing, but I'd rather look you in the eye than have competition from out of town come in with big pockets and just win against us all. And that doesn't help local jobs at all, especially high paying jobs. It just lowers the wages for the community. So it's really important that this goes through. I would prefer that we all draw names out of a hat for which square. And then I've got a process that I brought up that was that when somebody's done for the day, most of us only have 2 departures a day. And when we're done, we can take our sign away. And then somebody in the worst square out there could move into that spot. I think it should be the person in the worst spot gets first move. And then as the next vendor leaves, they can move over. So you have a chance to save your day on the second half of your day. And by the time we're all done leaving, that's when the people start showing up to go back to the ship. So we're not in their way at all. All that congestion was talked about. So there is a way of doing this that would be fair and cool and everybody work together. And so if you ended up in a crappy spot, you couldn't afford to go any higher on your bid or whatever, at least that spot should not be left empty all day. If I decided not to work today and I had the most expensive square, it would be a sin to me to not give it to the guy struggling on the back that has no visibility. It could just simply be the furthest guy over gets first chance at any open square. So the moment you're done with the day, it's done. That would be a really easy way to orchestrate this to where those squares aren't left empty all day and nobody's dying on the vine because they're stuck in a really horrible spot out there. So it'd just be a simple, and that could be done through Harrigan Centennial Hall. I don't know if you need an ordinance for that or not. It could just be a simple process, but we need to be able to count on that. And so I wouldn't mind giving a better spot to a newcomer coming in because I'm a little more established, but it took so long to get there. But I wouldn't mind giving that up if I knew that later in the day I could maybe move back into a spot as it cleared. But if you make them off limits because somebody bid on it 2 years ago and they haven't showed up in a month and nobody can use it, that would just be horrible for business down there and helping locals at all. Thank you for hearing me.
One more sentence, sir. You did have some time.
Is it bidding for just the pickup and delivery out there too, or is it just the squares that are being bid? Just
Neil McDermott of Whale Song Expeditions. I do agree that the bid should be made an outcry bid. I don't think it'll necessarily hurt anyone with a sealed bid. I think it would hurt someone because you're then relying on your total limit on what you would pay for that spot. Where if you did have an outcry bid, you may have a chance to save a little money because you could look a person in the eye, you know where the bidding stands. Every operator knows what their limitations would be on that. And with a sealed bid, all you're doing is asking for their maximum bid to be put out there at the first time. Also, the way that this amendment reads, it talks about that the operators must be present, I believe, and it doesn't address any of like a representative. At the last assembly meeting, we were told that we needed to pass this because there was a timeline that had been established for the process going forward with bids. I'd like to know what that timeline is. I'd like to understand when that is, because for my business personally, I'll be out of town for about 3 weeks in February. So if this bid process, this outcry bid does occur, and it's only limited to the owners and not a representative of my company, which I don't have a representative necessarily, I would have to say, hey, you're going to be my representative, Joe, and show up, and here's my limit to pay. So if that occurred while I'm out of town, it completely precludes me from having the opportunity to be a part of this. So I'd appreciate some consideration of those facts. Thank you very much.
Andy Nye. First off, I'd like to say sorry to Michelle. I am in full support of the open outcry. I don't want to make Michelle feel uncomfortable or anything. I'm a very nice guy, Michelle. I may not look like it, but I try to be a very nice guy. The closed bid, like was said, it can be so hard. As far as I am aware, and from what I've been able to deduce, so for like the spots in the back where I operate, there's only 5. And I've heard whisperings of other companies wanting to open back there. There's no knowledge of how many are going to be back there this year. And so I can't get the information of how many are trying to go back there. You know, if there's 3, sweet, you know, I can put in a bid and know that I'm going to get a spot. If there's going to be 7, you know, I've got to bid my, like Neil said, my most, you know, large amount that I can muster up. And with the open outcry bid, then I can know how many are actually going for that spot that show up that day. So you can see our concern here of not knowing how many are going. And I mean, I'm taking bookings every single day that come in that people are booking right now for this summer. And if I couldn't bid enough to get that spot, now that sounds like there's all this money coming in. My bookings aren't that much. When you get 2 here and 2 there and 2 here, you know, there's a lot of costs that go for. But if I can't bid enough for that spot and I lose it, I'm in a world of hurt. I don't have anywhere else I can really go to start my business. And so an open outcry would allow me the opportunity to sit down, know how many people are bidding for those spots. And like they say, be able to see and bid against those people versus throwing a number in an envelope and throwing it in and going, well, there might be 5, there might be 20, who knows how many. And we already know that there aren't enough spots out front. Sounds like there may be more spots being opened up, which would be great. But if there are only 10, and last year there were 14, who knows where that's going to go. An open cry would be very, very helpful. So I'm in full support and ask you guys to please support this as well. Thank you.
Any further public comment on ordinance 22-34, changing from a sealed bid to open outcry auction? Seeing none, back to the assembly for deliberation. Tor?
Yeah, I just have a clarify something with Brian a little bit. As I read this, and it doesn't say the actual owner of the business has to be the one to bid. It just says the business. So why that can't be an employee or even a representative? Would you agree?
What it actually says is open outcry auction procedures established by the HCH manager and approved by the city and borough administrator. And that's on line for 6 and line 72 and 73. The assumption is that's what the procedures would allow a representative to. And I've actually had this discussion with Tony and John already about this, but this is that issue of how much authority do you want to give to the people who are making the rules and regulations that implement the code. I would suggest that this is the appropriate way to do it, because there are tweaks that the HCH manager and Tony and John may want to do year from year. And gives them that discretion.
Yeah.
But the code definitely does not preclude representatives from being there for the owners of those bidding businesses.
And I will say that that was at least my intention with
Right.
this. The thought did cross my mind that maybe we make it actually have to be the owner, and that would make an out-of-town business a lot harder to do it. But that's also a pretty, I mean, everybody travels and things, and you can be flying Southwest right now and you're never gonna get home. And you better be able to call somebody and say, hey, I gotta be there. Here's how much you could spend. So anyway, I haven't heard anything. Like I said, I was fully prepared that if there was a lot of disagreement among the people who were speaking, that I wasn't wedded to this, but I haven't heard anything that I don't see how this hurts. And I like the transparency. And so I'm still going to support this.
Tim?
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks for the commentary. This is another one of those sort of interesting questions. I wonder how the fiscal note was arrived at for one, because I think we've even heard people here tonight speak to the fact that we would probably get more money as a assembly, I'm sorry, as a city, if we did a seal bid. So we're taking I think the people, if we go with this, which I'm in favor of at this point in time, going with outcry auction, even though it is fiscally less lucrative to this Centennial Hall. I think we need to realize there is a little bit of a conflict in terms of that, as well as a recognition that in order to make the businesses work and to make this ordinance better, that if we go with this, that's its intent, not that it's fiscally the most intelligent thing to do.
Kevin?
Thank you. Well, before the discussion started, I was dead set against this, just because for me, I was just trying to put myself in that position. I would really have a hard time standing in front of people, doing that kind of thing. It seems like it will embarrass people, and I don't like that at all. But I think a lot of the vendors are here currently. I don't know if there's a lot more. And I try to always remember that there's more people than just come to meetings, but so far we got 3 yeses and 1 no comment for this. And so I'm really, really struggling with this. So I'm going to say, I was going to say no, but I'm going to say yes this time just to pass it to second reading. But I'm not sure that I will vote yes at the next meeting. Thank you.
John and then Chris.
Yeah, a question came up earlier about the timeline for the bid, and we have held on the current bid process with the possibility that an outcry might be where we go. So I kind of need to wait on the answer to this one, and also if we were to do an outcry auction, it's going to be much more formalized than what we would see here with a volunteer who participates at a charity auction or something. We're going to want a real auctioneer, because the last thing I'd like to see happen is, and perhaps I'm overthinking this, but the last thing I'd like to see happen is somebody protest that their hand was up and they weren't called on, or something. It wasn't recorded correctly. So I'd bring in an appropriate person to make that happen. And we haven't set that timeline for the auction yet, because we don't know if this is going to pass yet. I need to wait on that piece of it. And also, I just want to throw out a couple things that I've heard is, and I talked about this in the last meeting too. This is municipal property that somebody is trying to quote unquote lease for exclusive use, which by code requires a competitive bid where it's sealed or outcry. But this is kind of a question for Sarah as well. Sealed bids come in and those bid openings are generally public. They've always been public openings, but could you quickly explain, if a sealed bid comes in and then the opening day gets here, how is that advertised for folks to be there to see that opening? Or am I way off?
How it's advertised?
How it's advertised or how people could get the word that it's bid opening day and they can see what everybody has bid.
So on the website, each of the bids are listed. And it's been a little while since I've looked at the exact wording. But as far as the procedures in my office, I'm in the office, the door is open, and I've had members of the public sit in my office, and we open up or while each one is opened. There may be wording that's in the bid advertisement, but that I don't know for certain, but it is open.
Thanks. I just wanted to point out that transparency piece, and that's another opportunity for the public to see us open the bids and to see that we're following the processes that are set forth in the ordinances.
Chris?
I guess you kind of bring up a new question for me, John. I understand that you do want to make this more official. Fiscal note wise, now going more official. I mean, what are we looking at for hiring someone to, is that what we're doing, is hiring an official auctioneer? And cost wise, what's this? What could this?
I don't know. I haven't researched that. I don't know the answer to that. And it's a matter of how much risk the city wants to assume. That's part of this equation as well. We could look for a volunteer or Tony could do it. But if there's a protest and Tony is not qualified as I don't know if there's a certification for auctioneers or anything, but if Tony's not qualified or certified and there's a protest, how does that protest process work? I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Yeah, I do see where this open cry can be beneficial. As a business person, I try to put myself in their shoes and, say I'm willing to pay $3,000 for a space and someone was willing to pay $3,100. Well, I haven't, I'd probably go to $3,200 to try to make that so I could get that space. And, I could see where, you start getting into this bidding war. Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to still consider on this. I do want to know more. So I think at this point I will vote yes to go to second reading, but I'm definitely going to do some more research, I think, in between meetings here and see what some of the logistics will be for this.
JJ?
Thank you, John, for that. That was really helpful on your time frame and that understanding of the impact on staff for this outcry. General question, has the city done an auction like this before for any sort of leasing, amenities, such thing? If that goes to Brian or John?
I can't think of a recent one off the top of my head, but I do know the Marine Service Center where we're doing an active RFP on that right now. I know that in the past that there have been public bids and an outcry auction for that facility, but that was quite some time ago. I don't know any other ones.
I am familiar with open outcry auctions that were done for airport leases before my time and before John's time, but I've seen documentation of those. And I've actually spoken to people who did it. And it was really, for that, it was really simple because they had only a small amount of people who were interested. And it was just like somebody from the administration just talking to one or two persons who wants to bid for this and give the amount and whatever. There was a minimum bid and stuff like that. So.
Thank you. That's helpful to kind of know, because this would be an ongoing thing that we would be doing annually, this outcry auction. And if it's cumbersome or limiting and beyond the staff capabilities, then that's an added responsibility that we have fiscally to understand. That is quite helpful. I think we did readily extend trust to the administrator and the staff when we were kind of flexible with the number of spaces. I think there's some still trust and flexibility to extend and other things. So I will be voting for this with that understanding.
So I'm going to present a little bit different perspective than what's been talked about so far tonight. And that's because a different perspective has been spoken to me that isn't currently in this room right now. And they actually are concerned about intimidation and fear in an open outcry auction. It's been brought up once, but some of the smaller vendors are very concerned about that. So I feel that it would be remiss on those if I didn't bring up their concerns, because last time at the table I asked people to come talk with me, and I did hear some response from that. So they believe, and I can understand how, that that this outcry will only benefit a large business, that they have a better opportunity to continue to raise the bid and simply push out a smaller business if they choose to, whereas a sealed bid allows everybody to put their best foot forward one time. And to further that, it appears to me that it's only the large established companies that are asking for an outcry auction. The smaller companies that I've spoken to aren't necessarily in favor of this. However, when I was sitting here tonight, one of the individuals testifying came forward, and they said that in order to make an informed bid decision, they have to know how many people they're bidding against. And that really resonated against me, or that resonated with me on this issue tonight, because you need to know as much information about this bid process as possible. And I think this is where it slightly differs from some of our other bid processes, where you have a really good idea. If you're bidding for the Marine Service Center, there's not a lot of people in town that need that much amount of cold storage. So you kind of have a solid idea of who the players are in the game, and you can make an informed decision after that. In this instance, especially this year, we don't know. I would suggest that next year, if cruising continues to be a lucrative business, that we wouldn't know about how many bidders are going to be next year either. And that presents some interesting dilemmas. So I came in here very hard set against this. I was very adamantly opposed, but I've heard testimony tonight that makes me perhaps reconsider some of the perspectives. John, I would ask, I know it's not an official statement from the assembly, but I would ask, when we make the rules for this outcry auction, that a representative of a business is allowed. There are multiple businesses where the owner delegates duties to an employee, and I don't see why it would have to be an owner of a business showing up, simply a representative of said business. So I probably will not support this tonight, in support of the smaller businesses that are frankly a little bit worried about this. However, my eyes are open to other options as well.
Just a quick follow-up that, like I said, this is purely, at least in my mind, in response to requests. And so this is first reading. And if you're one of those small businesses who really don't like this, our emails are on the city websites, our phone numbers, and let us know. So thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, by the way, Mayor.
Kevin?
I would second what Tor said. I would really appreciate to hear from everyone. I appreciate everything everyone said here. But I would like to know, if you're not sure about coming here, you can email the entire assembly, or email us individually. We do read them just because we don't always respond every time. Do read them. And I would appreciate as much input from relevant parties as possible before next meeting.
Further comments from the assembly? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2022-34 on first reading, changing from a sealed bid to an open outcry auction, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbais,
No.
Mr. Christensen,
Yeah, yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
and Mr. Pike.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-1, first reading, item G.
As I'm not sure if everybody will stay through reports, I just wanted to say thank you to those who did show up tonight. At times the procedure got a little bit looser than I care for, and that kind of made me want to rip my hair out as a procedure person. But however, I hope you're coming away more informed this evening than you were before you showed up. I hope that it was a productive meeting for you tonight, and assembly members, emails, doors are open to continue this discussion. So thank you for everybody coming and making a good process this evening on what was a fairly directed meeting tonight. So that would bring us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item on or off of tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the Assembly. My name's Don Cluting, sitting in the audience tonight, talking to a lot of the vendors over the last few months about this policy. One of the things that's apparent is in the planning process in the future, it might be good to reach out to the stakeholders and invite them to the meeting. Get the discussion going, get some input from them. Not pointing the finger at anybody. I'm just thinking small enough community, it'd be nice if we all talk to each other and figure this out together. I think that we can alleviate a lot of the conflict that happens at this table. One thing I want to point out, cost of this facility, $16 million renovation was paid for by the tourism dollars. This building was built to take care of tourism. Just want to keep that in the forefront of our minds. The last year I worked here, we had 18 vendors out there, I believe. During my career, I saw up to 22 vendors. I managed Harrigan Centennial Hall, for those of you that don't know. Managed this place for 29 years, worked here for 38 years. I'm very familiar with the operations around this building and what happened as far as the tourism industry goes. I started when there was one vendor out there, and that was Trudy Pruitt, Sitka Tours. We had 22 vendors at 200,000 people visitor-wise. The industry requires lots of vendors. They want excursions. Their people need to stay interested. So we need more people. We need more businesses to accommodate the numbers of people. I understand we have some growing pains. We don't have enough space is what it gets down to. We've always, one of the issues, when we had 22 vendors, we took care of every vendor. We had space for them. We didn't deny anybody. What we're talking about now is denying people the access to start a business. Outcry auction, it happens in Juneau. I'm gonna hurry here. I'm getting down on time. I got a few notes. Check with Juneau, find out what they do for their processes and their policies. If I am successful and I get one of the 10 squares or 15 squares that's out here, can I be a broker? Can I sublease my space? Lots of things to think about there. Basically, what I'm hearing about is there's a lack of space out here. I think that we have some inequities in the handling of this process. We have eliminated the handbill and leaflets and the sandwich board signs. So seaplanes, Yellow Jersey Cycle Shop can no longer be down here as a business, but yet other people are. We're allowing the kids to continue under 6.16. We're allowing the Alaska Native sales permits. We're allowing authors to sell books with Southeast Alaska topics, but we're excluding other businesses in this community. I think that there's some inequities. We need to take a comprehensive look at this. The other thing is enforcement. Tony's going to have a nightmare, guys. It's, the policies, everything. He's going to have a big job. He's going to get a lot of complaints, and we want to think that out and support staff. And also, I'd like to use my boat launch.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Ran out of time.
Bruce Conine, Sitka Wildlife Tours. I support a lot of what Don just said. There's no reason to cut the squares down to even smaller. The 20 has operated here for years. I've been doing this a long time. There's plenty of space. The most important problem that's come from this whole thing is the bidding process. Simply that. If you guys want to raise the fees, raise the fees. Allow 20 of us, up to 20 of us, to go out there and fill those squares and be done with it. We show up at 6 a.m. so we can get a good spot. Who in the hell would do that? But people that really care about being in the right spot. And we pay the price for that every day. It's brutal. And we don't end until 8 or 9 each night. It's a horribly long day. And to come to an assembly meeting at 6 o'clock when you've got vans to clean till 8 o'clock is near impossible. And that's what happened this summer. And we just had to decide, do our businesses or deal with this mess? We never intended it or never thought it could get this bad. So if you did away with the whole bidding process, just raise the fees, at least for this year. Just make it simple. Raise the dang fees to $3,000 or $4,000, call it good. Just the taxes I generated covered the cost of this building this year. There's no reason for this insanity. Save the whole bidding thing, kill it. And you solve the problem. We can handle up to at least 20 vendors in the squares and probably another 30 or more just picking up in the parking lot. And if we make sure the charter guys are paying for showing up at the dock, that way my boat might actually be able to get a spot, that I pay for, that they don't pay for. That would be where you could get your money. Stop the bidding process. I don't want to bid against my friends. And we've made friends out of people we compete with. Isn't that a Sitka kind of thing? It is to me. And I'd like to see it stay that way. And, I don't blame people for being afraid to bid, but at the same time, if you go to an auction at a storage unit, you got to bid. So, but I think the bidding process sucks. I think it was a dumb idea from the get-go, and that's what's caused all this grief and everybody anxiety, and everybody's worried about their businesses all over that one stupid move that is really unnecessary because we're generating enough tax revenues and jobs, by the way, that help our community. So why not just help us help the community and just make it simple? Problem solved. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Karen Lucas. And first of all, I just want to say, wish you a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. We still have the Russian Orthodox Christmas coming up. I know that our tourism is an evolving issue. I think the more flexibility that can be allowed is going to be the most beneficial. And one of the thoughts I had was, I know that this building is the hub. And however, if the tourists were distributed prior to coming here, like say the guys that want to go to the Fortress or go to the Raptor Center, or maybe they want to walk the docks down at Eliason, that those options are presented as they get off the ships. And then buses go from site to site. And because I just know how badly I felt for these tourists who were in these extremely long lines waiting to get on a bus to get back to the cruise ship. And I think there might be a more creative way to go about it. The other thing I want to say is, I missed the Christmas lights this year on the light posts, and I did like the tree, and thank you for doing that. And I also realize you're having a hard time filling positions for people to work. But just know that I noticed that, and I did miss the Christmas lights on the light post decorating our town in the dead of night in this winter time. But what I really want to talk about is our trash and garbage situation. And I think with the way the world is changing and just freight, transportation, this, that, and the next thing, a town this size needs to take care of its trash right here. And I think that's a real priority for our city. And this is a model that's used in other places. And I just heard about it, read about it, whatever. And I really like it. And I think it could be a moneymaker, not only that, but it could also provide employment for anyone who feels so led to go back to work. That the trash issue, it's fourfold. That first, there's a secondhand aspect to it. You got an old couch, there's a building big enough to receive it. And there's trading going on with items, large items, kitchen items, whatever. It's a secondhand. That way we're not overloading the white elephant. Help, 5 minutes. The second is to recycle next. Second, organic materials. And
Ma'am, thank you
lastly,
for your time this
burn
evening.
it.
In fairness
We
to
need an
everybody, we will limit you to
incinerator.
3 minutes.
Yeah, I do appreciate that.
Thank you for your time
I
this evening.
understand. I'm
I do
out of time.
appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Richard Ween. Comprehensive waste disposal is something that's been on the assembly discussion for quite a while, and I agree it needs to be discussed. Just a couple of things about legislation. It was said here that it's not a good idea to work in every contingency. Well, if you're writing a contract, I would expect the attorney to write in every contingency every time you press agree on the, when you get a new app or whatever. I actually read all of these statements, and some of them are 30, 40 pages long, every contingency. A good thing is to, when you're doing legal things, is to show your hand. And that's why you need like pre-ordinances to show your hand exactly what you're thinking. There are a lot of questions that would not have happened if you did think about every contingency. One of the things that needs to be considered is that you need to cap tourism. That would solve a lot of problems. I think we need to think in terms of quality, not quantity. I think that now that everybody has said their thing on outcry, I think you should have one more space than the number of people who need them, and you fix the fees. That would probably be the best thing for this coming year. But what is also very interesting is that world situations, national situations, and even state situations may totally prevent all of these good wishes. I like reading international and so forth. And did you know that Germany has begun implementing restrictions on the use of nitrogen fertilizers? That's what we get our food from. Over the years, Gates has purchased over 200,000 acres of farmland. Well, what's he going to do with it? Make dude ranches? And the Irish have started to decrease the number of cattle and also restricting the number of automobiles. To me, that would hurt, especially since I love on St. Patty's Day to have corned beef, and I would hate to see there a shortage. Bottom line is there's a lot going on in the world today. And to me, I'm a middle of a ground person, though you may not agree. I like thinking in moderation. And I think if we're thinking these two big things and so forth, I think we're really going to lose the town here. And we really should be dealing with, since there is so much outside money coming in, I don't see any recognition of that within Sitka. I do my due diligence when I see people running around and I see their corporations. I look up on the Alaska Corporation Search and I find out and I look at the trail of who they are and where they're coming. And they ain't Sitkans and they got a lot of money. So think moderation.
Andy and I just wanted to thank everyone for your time tonight. And just one last little thing. Mayor, you were talking about how many people had come to you, the small guys with business. I'm one of those small guys. My company's very small. New the year before COVID hit us, and I barely made it through COVID. Last year, we finally had a little bit of business, a decent year of business. We actually made just a tiny bit of money after 3 years of losing a ton of money. 1 year, the first year into COVID, I took 7 people on tour that whole year. So we are very much one of those little guys. And I still think that public outcry auction allows me to know. So like Don said, I didn't even know Don. He said something about maybe him being in here this year. That's another one right there. I didn't know that that person was coming. Sorry, not Don, not that person. I didn't know Don was going to be another person that I'd be competing against. And that's just another opportunity. So I want to thank you all for voting for that and keep that in mind next time as well. We just don't know who we'll be voting against. And so the main thing here is just working together. We are Sitkans working together, okay? Just like Don said, this building was built with tourism money. It's used as a community center. It's used as tourism. We're the ones here in the wintertime. I'm originally from Idaho. I've been in tourism in Alaska for 20 years. I came up for a summer job. 20 years later, I'm still here, okay? There's a different feel. There's those that come up in the summertime, they do the summer, they leave and go home. There's kind of a brotherhood, a bond that's in Alaska. We all know how it is. We're here in the winter, we're here in the dark, we're here together. We can work together or we can argue together. Let's work together. Let's make sure it works for everybody, works for the city, works for the tourism, works for the businesses, works for everybody. Let's talk, let's work together. Let's make sure it works for everybody so that people can have businesses. Let's catch that money. If it doesn't stay here, it's going somewhere else. If we don't catch it in Sitka, hopefully it'll get caught in Alaska. If it doesn't get caught in Alaska, it's going to the Caribbean, it's going to the Bahamas, it's going on their next cruise. Let's catch it in Sitka. Let's get it while it's here. Let's show them a good time. Let's show them Sitka. Let's get some tax dollars here. The money stays here in Sitka. It's not just the tax dollars. It's the revenue. It's the money that feeds my family, goes to the Hames Corporation, goes to the daycare, goes to the dance recitals, goes to everything. It infuses the community and comes full circle. It's the economy. Let's keep it in our economy. Let's work together. Let's think about each other. Thank you.
Neil McDermott of Whales Song Expeditions. I'm another one of those small businesses that does support many of the things that were amendments that were brought up here today. And I do want to talk about how tough it is on some small business and how tough it is as a small business. Yeah, the dollars that we make sometimes they seem pretty high to some of y'all, but the costs involved, you have, I know Chris runs a boat. I don't know who else runs a boat commercially here, but the cost to run a boat, the amount of tax dollars that we bring in just from the operations of those boats, the maintenance on the boats, the gas on the boats. I spent $30,000 last year on gasoline alone just to run my boat. Yeah, that's good because I was busy, but it brought in a significant amount. I had to buy a new motor just because of the supply chain issues to have it on hand. That's another couple grand in taxes that brought forward here. So these small businesses that you're affecting are speaking out pretty loudly because we weren't involved in the planning of this at all. We're stakeholders here. We're part of this community. We want to be part of this community, and we weren't invited to the table to discuss our futures. I'd like to see that change. It seems like now it's really a challenge to impact and for us to have a say in what is going on with this ordinance going forward. Thank you very much.
Anyone else for persons to be heard on or off of tonight's agenda? Yes, Kevin Mosier, persons to be heard.
Speak under persons to be heard. I just again want to thank everyone for speaking out. Appreciate hearing what everyone has to say. But What I was just going to say actually has nothing to do with that, has to do with public comment. I know it's difficult that we have a 3-minute timer on, but I want to thank the mayor for trying to, as best he can, to keep, to be fair. I think that's appropriate, and I just want to remind everyone that the reason for this is to ensure that everyone has an equal amount of time to speak, and also that we can get through our agenda, because the meeting has to end by 10:30 every night, and we can vote to extend it, but only to 11 by 11 o'clock automatically. And it wasn't an issue tonight, but it can be. So that is why we have time limits. And I do appreciate everyone's comment tonight. Thank you.
Any other public persons to be heard, public participation on or off tonight's agenda? That'll bring us to reports. I have no report this evening. John?
I do, Mayor, but I have to go over there so I can pull up a show and tell. One sec. I think Sarah, you have to, it says on screen sharing, but there's something you have to activate there. While she's doing that, I'll do the first quick part of my report and then I'll get to this one. If you look in your packets, there's a quarterly report in there from the police department. I've started something on the agendas for every single assembly meeting. There's going to be a quarterly report from one of our departments, and I've got them staggered where they'll continue to come in. And I've asked for 3 standard things to be in those reports. It's current project status. And I want that project status to start tying to specific action items from the strategic plan, so you can see what we're working on, how it's in alignment with the plan and the progress on it. The second thing is a staffing table. So you'll see the current org chart where we'll list any vacancies that we have. And then the third part is going to be the budget. This I wanted to pull up as a show and tell for today, because we've had issues of vandalism and destruction in the past. And every time this happens, it costs the citizens money. It takes away our use of the facility, and it detracts city employees from their core service duties when they have to respond to things like this. Now, I don't know if this was an act of vandalism. I don't know if it was accidental, but we've heard complaints before about how we lock the restrooms at night, some of the public restrooms, and that there's access cut off to certain folks at certain times. But I wanted to show these pictures of the male restroom at Moeller Field. If you look on your screen here, we had a fire in the restroom at Moeller Field, and this is the destruction that came of it. You can see the melted overhead light there. You can see the rest of the facility that's burned. There's a lot of cleanup and work that has to be done here. So I wanted everybody to see this and see where we have to expend funds now and how we're going to have to close that facility and unfortunately go back to ensuring that the facilities are locked in any times that they cannot be supervised. So again, that was it for here. So hopefully those pictures make it out to the appropriate media channels. And I know we've sent a press release out about that already. And the last thing I have is if I can actually find a seat on an airplane. I plan on being gone on vacation for a few days starting tomorrow, returning on the 3rd. Scott Elder will be acting for the 28th and 29th, and then Michael Harmon will be acting on the 30th through January 3rd. Thanks.
Brian?
I did attend the Alaska Municipal Attorney Association conference in early December. I've done these a number of times during my tenure as a municipal attorney. As usual, I found it to be very beneficial to my job. The seminar subjects were every one of them was topical to the things that I was dealing with. And meeting with my colleagues and the networking that was done is very beneficial. Just wanted you to make sure you know that it's my intent to attend those and that are very beneficial. The big bang for the buck at those things. Thank you.
Any liaison representative reports this evening? Chris?
So our last Port and Harbors meeting was on the 14th. Harbor Master report reported that there is a new cruise ship that is interested in using the port wall. It's estimated at 6 port calls for this next season, which will be good for the facility. It's not exactly a massive revenue generator, so a new revenue stream will be good, considering the amount of money that we're about to sink into it. Harbors is planning on advertising for a new position. It'll be an all-around position. One of the most important parts of that, I believe, is for security, because we don't have that much port security employees. But it'll also be for maintenance and everything else. Hopefully that will cut down on overtime costs. I guess we've been accruing quite a bit of overtime costs due to our staffing. So hopefully that'll cut that down. The commission voted to increase the wharfage fee at the seawall from $4 to $5, trying to mirror the Gary Paxton Industrial Park tariff. And then last thing on our agenda, there was a request for using A and B parking lot from the A and B hall and using 2 of the spaces within that parking lot, and the commission unanimously voted that down. So that's it for reports.
Any other liaison representatives? Sarah?
Just a quick recap of January meetings. January 10th and January 24th are your regular meetings. On January 19th, we have a budget work session with the school board. And then January 26th, a government to government dinner meeting.
Great, thank you. Any other reports this evening? Seeing none, that would bring us to adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Thank you, Assembly. We are adjourned.